Eichel, but Jankowski wins the faceoff. Tanev, shot, score! Oh, Canada! The Toronto native gives the Friars the lead.
Pinnacle of the sport was on display that night 5.5 years ago. Of course, I'm talking about the Cinderella Providence College Friars 4-3 national championship victory over the heavily favored BU Terriers. On the goal you just heard, scored by current Pittsburgh Penguin Brendan Tanev. Maybe the greatest college hockey game I've ever seen. It'll be remembered, no doubt, for Terrier goalie Matt O'Connor's blunder, dropping the puck out of his glove into the back of his net late in the third to pull Providence even right before Tanev scored to give them the lead and the win. Everybody always sort of talks about those sporting events where you remember exactly where you were and you'll never forget it. And that's sort of one for me. I don't know if you can say the same, Dylan, but I just remember watching this game almost in pure disbelief, because we talked about it on the trivia, on the first the Hockey East trivia, how it just sort of seemed like BU was destined to win. They played the Beanpot, and it was sort of a similar situation.
They had Eichel?
The year with Eichel, yeah, definitely. And they just had, they had so much talent. They had so much talent on that team. And I can't remember who they played the Beanpot final or the Hockey East final, but it felt like the same thing. That the team was their opponent was sort of scrapping their way to a close game, but BU would eventually just pull away because they were just such a good team. And for the national championship to sort of go differently than the previous two, and for the O'Connor blunder, it's just one I will never, ever, ever forget. I remember I was watching it I was in Milwaukee, actually. I was in the old Pabst Blue Ribbon brewery, the original one, which they turned into a hotel. And I was watching the game, and my jaw was to the floor. It was just an incredible game.
I got a couple thoughts on that. First of all, I think it's hilarious how you were in Milwaukee at that time, because you went to school out there.
Yeah, I was at a family day, I believe.
Yep. Same deal for me. Exactly the same. I was in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I was touring schools. I was touring Coastal Carolina. And yeah, it's funny how people always talk about big games or big events in general as they always remember where they were. And I think that's kind of a marker as to how big something is. And I do remember it so vividly. And I've mentioned this before on here. I just hope Matt O'Connor's doing okay today, because that blunder, as you put it, in my mind, there's probably some that surpass it, but I can't think of any significant blunder that directly screwed over your team as badly as that. I'm thinking of Bill Buckner. Bill Buckner, maybe.
That was a tie. That was a tie game, though. The Red Sox had blown that lead, though.
Yep.
And I suppose. Yeah, I mean that's a debate for a different day. They needed a touchdown. They couldn't just take a field goal and win the game. They needed a touchdown, and they're at the 2. Again, this is a podcast for maybe a football. This is talk for maybe a football podcast, but that's not as bad as dropping the puck in the back of your net to literally give your opponent's life in the national championship. Right. The only thing I could think of is maybe a missed field goal. I'm remembering a Seahawks and Vikings game where the Vikings kicker missed like a 27-yard field goal to lose the game. Mm-hmm. But something along those lines. Yeah. But I mean
I agree. And the Pete Carroll thing, I brought that up to kind of say that I don't think that reaches Matt O'Connor. I was basically agreeing with you. I mean, they were supposed to win that game in my mind.
No, they were. They were favorites. I mean, I think Providence was like the 14th team out of 16.
Yep.
And they essentially had home ice. They played the regional in Providence, which, I mean, come on, you can't give a 4 seed
I know,
home
right?
ice advantage, but I mean, still, they won the semifinal, and then they won the national title. I mean, with that goal by Brendan Tanev, that was an absolute snip over O'Connor's glove, which blame him for the third one, but he had no chance on that one.
Yeah.
But it's just I mean, it was absolutely just the craziest game. I mean,
Right, and I think BU is well aware that that would be their only year with Jack Eichel,
yeah,
and
yeah.
man, that really hurts. In all honesty, I'm having a real hard time thinking of a single instance that surpasses that. Maybe if I thought hard enough, I could think of one, but as of now, I just feel really bad for Matt
No,
O'Connor.
I can't either. I mean, that one, I'd say that's the greatest college hockey game, along with that, the one in 2009 that BU won,
Yep.
when they scored 2 goals with the goalie pulled, and then the Frozen Four game between UMass and Denver, the Mark Del Gaizo watch out game. Maybe I'm a little bit biased on that one, but those are 3 of the all-time classic. But if you couldn't figure out by now, this is Puck Buds. Nothing last week, but we promise, at least I hope, that we'll make up for it. We've got trivia coming down the line. It's always a blast. I love doing trivia. It might be the NHL offseason, but the reason we're talking about college hockey is because it's back, baby! The Big Ten drops the puck on its season on Friday. Wisconsin, Notre Dame, Michigan, an honorary Big Ten member for this season, Arizona State, yes, you heard that right, will be in action this weekend. But there's a little bit of drama involving one of Michigan's players, which we'll get to. Since I said it's the NHL offseason and the free agency hot stove is cooling a little bit, we thought it would be fun to do some position rankings. Those have sort of been making the waves on the internet in the last couple of weeks, so why not? We'll throw our hands at that. Today we'll start with defensemen. Maybe in another episode we'll switch to a different forward group or maybe goalies. But first, we should get to the drama, because I think it can spark a really interesting conversation about international hockey during the season. Of course, no NHL players at the Olympics in 2018, and I don't know if it's, the rumor has it, I don't know if it's for sure that NHL players will be back in 2022, but they definitely want to, but this isn't about the Olympics. This involves Owen Power, who is currently a freshman for Michigan. By all accounts, this guy is a surefire top 3 pick in the NHL draft this coming spring and could probably go number 1. So he's 6'5", solid skater. He had 40 points in, I believe, 48 games in the USHL. You're getting 40 points as a 6'5" defenseman. That's pretty big time. So he's already garnered some comparisons to Chris Pronger and Victor Hedman, which I think those guys are good. I'm not sure or anything, but so he's Canadian, and he was selected by Team Canada for the upcoming World Junior Tournament. Now, I'm sure anyone listening to this is fairly familiar with the World Junior Tournament, but some of the details are essential to have this conversation. So the tournament is U20, regardless of professional status. So someone in the AHL or NHL can play. It takes place in and around the week that separates Christmas and New Year's. Obviously, this year is a little bit different. It'll be in the Edmonton bubble, the same one that the West played the Stanley Cup playoffs in. So the Canadian government requires anybody entering the country to quarantine for 2 weeks. So players would have to get to the bubble in the early or middle part of December. There's also a training camp that starts on November 16th. So, long story short, the University of Michigan, the hockey program, told Owen Power he can't go, and they won't release him from his playing responsibilities. So, in normal years, like I said, it's not a normal year. College teams would typically have a holiday break from about the 3rd week in December until the 2nd week in January or so. Now, they may play 2 or 3 games during that time, but they're almost always out of conference, and obviously out of conference games don't count to the conference standings, but not this year. So the Big Ten has only released part of its schedule, but the holiday break won't be taking place. Canada's first game in the World Juniors is on December 26th, meaning Power would have to get to Canada on the 12th. If Power played in the Hockey East, for instance, he'd be missing around 8 games, and they would all be in conference. Now, with the NHL not playing until after January 1st, the pool of prospects for teams, for Team Canada, for Team USA, for anybody, is much bigger than it normally is. So Canada has made their training camp selections. Like I said, their training camp is set to start on November 16th. And they've only picked 4 college players, which does not include Kent Johnson, who is Power's teammate at Michigan and is a projected first-round pick. Team USA has not announced their roster yet, but another Michigan Wolverine, Cam York, who was picked in the first round of last year by Philadelphia, played on the team last year. So odds are he'll be selected again. So we'll wait and see how Michigan rules that, whether or not they will let York play for Team USA. So that was a lot of info, but I think it raises a pretty good question about international play taking place during the season. So Dylan, should Michigan let Power go play for Team Canada?
So I'll admit that I think I was a little harsh in my initial thoughts when I first heard this.
Well, I did see you tweet about it, and I thought, okay, we're definitely talking about this on the pod.
Right. I used my personal account rather than the podcast account for that. But yeah. So I think at first I was pretty critical. I didn't really give myself too much time to think, and I think that's my own fault. I think I'm starting to side with Michigan a little bit more as this goes along. It is tough because other programs are sending their top tier guys. So if you do that kind of compare and contrast thing, Michigan is kind of alone in doing this, but this is an unprecedented situation with the world. You just explained pretty clearly. The World Juniors is very heavily going to interfere with this year's college schedule. I'd really like to think that they discussed this with Owen Power at length. I don't know. Obviously, I'm not in that inner circle. How would I know that? But I'd like to think that there was some kind of an agreement here. And yeah, I was much more critical of them when I first heard the news than I am now after reading up on the difficulties with the schedule. You mentioned the 2-week quarantine. I mean, that's huge. I heard that he could miss up to 10 games.
Yep.
What would that be, 25% of the season? Something like that? Probably more.
Probably more, yeah.
Probably more, yeah. We're probably looking more at closer to a third, somewhere in between.
Maybe
there.
even a half.
I know. So, and who even knows how many games they're gonna play? So, missing 10 games this year is worse than any other year.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm starting to. I won't completely side with Michigan, but I'm leaning towards them. I'm lightening up a little bit. This is, after all, their guy. They recruited him. They got him. I'm sure that was not an easy task at all. And I think they know this could be their only year with him, and they want to squeeze everything they can out of him.
So I get all the people that are saying that Michigan overstepped their bounds and they're costing this kid a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But here's the question. Is he even guaranteed to make the team? I mean, if you just look at Team Canada's roster, it is stacked. It is stacked. And there already have been some noteworthy cuts. I'm referring to Alex Newhook getting cut from the team last year. By all accounts, he was a shoo-in. So if you're Michigan and this guy's not guaranteed to make the team, you really want to lose him for the 2 weeks that he's in Canada for the training camp? That's the start of your season. And then the 10 games that he could miss, whether it's 7, 8, 9, whatever it is, that's not even including going to training camp. So, look, this kid, he signed with Michigan. He declared that he was going to play for this team. And like, I understand that most of the time, hell, every time, colleges have been like, yep, go play for your team. Go play for Team Canada. Go play for Team USA. Go play for Team Finland, Sweden, whatever. But this year's different. And losing that guy for a third or a half of the season, that's a lot to overcome. And at the end of the day, you play for the University of Michigan. You're a student athlete at Michigan. You're not property of Team Canada. Team Canada doesn't have the last say of what you do. Michigan does. So if Michigan wants to say you can't go play for Team Canada, they have every right to do that. Sure, it's ruling with an iron fist, but that's sort of what you signed up for. And I know it kind of makes me seem like a tough hard ass, but if this guy really wants to go play for Team Canada, he can go play in the juniors, or he can go play overseas. He can leave Michigan. I mean, there's nothing stopping him, but Michigan has every right to say, nope, can't go.
I was thinking the same thing about if he really wanted to, if this was a real issue for him, and he was a real proud Canadian, he could leave. He could go play in Europe. He is from Ontario, so the issue with that is the CHL, it works by regions, so he would have to play in the OHL. And the OHL, we all know what's going on there. It's not really a hot destination. Obviously, for those who don't know, there's no checking this year. As of now, they're working on finding a solution to that, but I'm not sure the OHL is too tempting, but you're absolutely right. He could leave. He could go to Europe. Matthews went to Sweden. The leagues over there are getting better and better. And, he hasn't come out with any angry public statement or anything like that. I mean, you typically wouldn't see that out of an 18-year-old freshman in college, but I'd just really like to think, like I said, that there was some mutual agreement there. I'd like to think that they at least ran it by him and did some convincing. Playing for Team Canada at the World Juniors is, to me, that's just like going to the Olympics. This is something that kids, the teams every year, look at them every single year. They're just incredible. And obviously not everyone pans out at the NHL level, but you're absolutely right in saying that this team is stacked. And don't get me wrong, I think he'll make the team. But I won't say unprecedented, but this team is stacked.
I would say unprecedented. In fact, you got NHLers.
They had that team in 2005, I believe, with Sidney Crosby, Dion Phaneuf, a few others.
Patrice Bergeron.
Right. I believe he was like a third or fourth liner or something like that. But that happened to him in the Olympics in 2010 too. Bergeron was on the fourth line. Just speaks volumes.
No, I mean the only team that you could really compare this to is the lockout team.
Right.
When all the guys are available. I mean, this team is going to be unbelievable.
Right.
And I think I was just going to say, I think it's a legitimate fear that Michigan loses this guy for a big chunk of the season, and the coach says, we've coached all of these guys before. These guys have been drafted. They have more seniority over you. We're taking them. Sorry.
And just to put things into perspective, they have half of the top 10 of last year's draft. They have, let me look at this. Right now, on paper, Lafreniere's on the team. Obviously, that's going to come down to what Josh Gordon and the New York Rangers decide to do with him. But as of now, they have Lafreniere, Byfield, Jamie Drysdale, Cole Perfetti, and Jack Quinn. That's 5 of the first 10 picks of last year's draft. And that's only last year. Yeah. Look at the other players like Ryan Suzuki, Kirby Doc. Who else do we have? We have Connor McMichael. I mean, these guys are incredible. And these guys, it's like I said, they have 5 guys from the first round this year, and then pretty much everyone else is either going to go in the first round in the coming years or has already gone in the first round in past years. I mean, I'm going to pull up that 05 roster and do some comparing and contrasting, but this is incredible.
So another question this sort of raises is, I think we both think it's fairly reasonable for it. I mean, I think we'd also both say that it's ruling a bit with an iron fist to not let a guy go to play internationally in the middle of the season. But do you think it's reasonable for the NHL owners, for the Olympics, for example, to say, you know what, we don't want our guys to go to the Olympics. They go balls to the wall to play for their country, and they come back and they are dinged up and we don't get the same production out of them. I don't think that's the reason. I'm sure it's not the reason that Michigan doesn't want Power to go to the juniors, but do you think that's a realistic leg to stand on for these owners to be like, you know what? No, the Olympics, there's absolutely no benefit to the NHL team, which pays you and has your rights for these players to go to the Olympics. Because for me, I think it's a legitimate gripe. No hockey fan is going to say they don't want to watch the Olympics because the Olympics are the best. But this thing's sort of said 1.5 million times. Professional sports are a business, and these players, at its simplest, are business assets. And yes, University of Michigan, I mean, hell, Owen Power is sort of an asset of the University of Michigan. And if they say we don't want to take them, we shouldn't go. And I'm sort of in the same boat with the Olympics. I think, look, if they don't want these guys to go, then they don't go, or they need to have some sort of agreement between the players and the owners where the owners have some sort of incentive to let these guys go.
Right, and I hate to say it, I really do, but I've always kind of thought in a similar way. I don't side with the owners necessarily. I won't say I take their side, but man, I do think I understand where they're coming from more so than the average fan. I think a lot of fans just think about how cool the Olympics are, and don't get me wrong, I love the Olympics. I love watching them. I tell people the 2 greatest games I've ever watched were both Olympic games, and I'm talking about TJ Oshie's shootout versus Russia 2014 and USA versus Canada in the gold medal game 2010. In my mind, those are the 2 greatest games I have ever watched. So there's that. But you know what? I think we part of analyzing things like this is looking at the other perspective and realizing that they absolutely are business assets. They're multi-million-dollar business assets. Some of them exceed $10 million a year. And these owners, let's never lose sight of the fact that they bought the team to make money and to win games.
And they sign the checks. They
exactly.
send these guys checks.
Exactly. And you know, I guess really to sum up my thoughts, I don't necessarily side with the owners. I try to see both sides, but I do think I get where they're coming from more so than the average hockey fan. I think it's just a matter of how much you're willing to put yourself into their shoes. The one that I really think about is 2014. John Tavares was out for the season after getting hurt in the Olympic quarterfinals against Latvia. So, I mean, you know, what's interesting about that game is Canada actually barely beat Latvia. They only won 2-1, so it wasn't a total throwaway game. But you don't want to hear that your guy, your huge star, your captain, got hurt playing against a pretty unproven hockey country that is still very much developing their team in a game that really should have just been a throwaway game. And, you know, I mean, it's the quarterfinals, don't get me wrong, it's very important. And like I said, it turned out to be a close game. But when I think of the GMs and their complaints about the Olympics, this is the one that I really think about because, I mean, there's no reason to believe that it couldn't happen again. It most likely will happen again. And, you know, I hope it's not a star player, but it's absolutely within the realm of possibility that one of your guys is out. So, yeah, I hate to say it, I understand where the owners are coming from on this, and I always have.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said this before, there's just no benefit to letting these guys go play in the Olympics. What's going to happen is they're going to grind hard for 2 weeks. They're going to come back banged up because when you play playoff hockey, and that's what the Olympics is, you get dinged up. It's a grind. And then these players are coming back, and it's the stretch run for the playoffs? Why would you want this? If you were the owner, why would you sign off for this unless there's something you're getting back? Like when they were negotiating the collective bargaining agreement back in 2005 and the owners wanted to institute a salary cap and the players were like, no way. I could see it being a scenario where the owners say, you guys can go play in the Olympics, but we get a salary cap. There has to be a big incentive or else there's just absolutely no point. I mean, these owners, why would the owners be nice and hurt their product so that these guys can play in the Olympics? Right. And to tie it back to Michigan, it's sort of the same thing. And to just sort of say like, oh, these guys aren't very nice and they're owning with an iron fist. These guys aren't their owners. And it's like, they kind of are. So it's just, to me, it's honestly, it's pretty black and white. And I guess, I mean, I love the Olympics, but in this situation, I do sort of side with the owners. And I hate siding with the owners and anything because, I mean, they're the owners.
And, you know, it's just a reminder in a way that nothing's free in life. There's going to be a game of give and take in everything, especially with business negotiations. And I was thinking the same thing. The players would have to chalk something up, whether it's, I don't know, higher escrow, which they would hate, but it's, you know, obviously my knowledge is limited in the business side of the game.
The finances.
Right, but they would absolutely have to, it wouldn't come free.
No,
you know, it
no,
would come with some incentive for the owners, because let's never lose sight of the fact that these guys bought the team to make money.
Yeah, oh, for sure. So I'm actually a little bit surprised that we sort of agreed on these things. Maybe we're just an agreeable podcast. I don't know. But I'm sure we could find people that will totally disagree. I loved seeing all the people on Twitter that were like bashing college hockey because they didn't let them go. And it's like, come on, dude. But let's go from college. Well, we were talking about the pros a little bit. But let's go from talking about a college defenseman to talking about the pro defensemen, particularly the 10 best. So I'm sure everybody saw the NHL tweeted out their top 20, I believe it was 20, their top 20 defensemen. Obviously, NHL 21 came out and they have their rankings based on overalls. So I thought it would be fun to do our own rankings. I don't know how we want to do this. I have a feeling our first few are going to be the same. Should we go 10 to 1 or 1 to 10? I feel like the first few are fairly obvious.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, actually. I think up until we get to number 5, there's probably not going to be a huge amount of differences. And then even still after that, there's probably going to be a few that match each other.
Yeah. All right. So I think let's start at 1. I mean, I think 1's obvious, Victor Hedman.
Yeah. I didn't even put too much thought into it.
No. Easy. I mean, Victor Hedman is just he's the perfect defenseman. He's big, he's physical, he can skate, he's smart. I mean, what more could you want?
I feel like he has a very good head on his shoulders. I feel like he's a smart defenseman.
And they lean on him.
I think he sees the game very well, and he sees the game in a way that can keep up with his level of play. There are legitimately guys out there that are too fast for their own good. And he is just, his mind can just process things. It's like he sees his things so clearly out there, and for a lot of other guys, it's just a blur of colors. And you know, he's physical. He can score as we've seen for years now. He's the best out there.
Yeah, he really is. I think he's a Stanley Cup or 2, a Norris Trophy or 2 from being a tier 1 defenseman. I mean, where do you want to go? Orr, Lidstrom, Ray Bork. I think he's got a legit shot at being, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 of all time if he keeps getting these cups, keeps getting these Norrises, because I don't know how anybody could play better than he has in the past few seasons. I just don't.
No, he covers a lot of ice with that big body too.
Yep. So he's
good luck beating him wide.
Good luck beating him at all, honestly.
Yeah.
So he's number 1, no question. Number 2, I'm assuming you have Roman Josi.
I do, yep.
Roman Josi.
Put some thought into this, but I ultimately was pretty confident in Josi.
Yeah, he's obviously he's not as near the level of Hedman, but Nashville depends on him almost to the same extent that Tampa depends on Hedman. He's a guy that plays in every single area of the ice. He's not as strong in his own end as Hedman, but he's made up for it with his offensive game, which has really started to skyrocket in the last couple seasons.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about a true leader? This guy, you can just watch one interview of him, and he comes across as a very well-spoken, hard-working guy who does it all on the ice. And you mentioned his offense. He came very close to a point in game last year.
Yeah, that's
65
silly.
Points.
That's silly for a defenseman.
And the era of the offensive defenseman, I think, is really among us. I think it's coming. I think you see a lot of these guys that put up points. Their points come from making good plays in their own end. They can just move the puck. They can move it up ice, and then eventually join the rush. And then once they're in the zone, they're an option, and they can shoot. And defensemen are becoming, it's almost a slight shift in the culture of what makes a good defenseman. And Roman Josi is an exceptional modern-day defenseman. I'm looking at his stats right now. I mean, almost a point a game at a plus 22 on Nashville.
Wow.
That's a great year. And
I mean, oh yeah, that's
he's,
good. That's absurd.
He's just, you're right. He's not quite as steady in his defensive end as Hedman. I think he's a little bit more susceptible one-on-one.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we're still talking about a guy who, in my opinion, is pretty clearly the second best in the league.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, number 3, I have John Carlson.
I do too.
John. All right, maybe I saw your list or something.
No, I figured 1 through 4 might be like this.
Okay, well, John Carlson, I think obviously he is regarded so highly because of his offensive abilities. I mean, he is a pinnacle offensive defenseman. He had an absolutely unbelievable season this year. I think he had 75 points. He's the quarterback of the best power play over the last 10 years, minus maybe the Boston Bruins. And I think his defensive game is actually a little bit underrated. Of course, he's susceptible to defense. I'm not going to try to argue that he's not. But, I mean, he blocks shots. He does a little bit of penalty killing. And overall, his numbers for goals against per 60 minutes, an advanced metric, is not that bad. So I think that John Carlson, I got him at number 3.
Yeah, I'm looking at his stats right now. He did reach 75 points last year, 70 the year before, and 68 the year before that. So these 3 years, he's taken a huge step forward in terms of his offensive production. Before that, he was still a decent offensive defenseman, but now he's really in that 0.8, 0.9, even exceeding a point a game level. And then I'm also looking at his plus-minus throughout his career. Overall, it's a plus 92 over the span of 757 games. But what sticks out to me is that he's been a plus player or even for the past 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And so, yeah, he's been a plus player. 1 year he was a 0 even, but that was the year they won the Cup, so we'll give him a break.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just not much to dislike about this guy's game, and he's always been good. He scored that big goal for the World Junior team back in the day. Do you remember that?
We were just talking about the World Juniors. He's a World Juniors hero.
He's always been a great player, but these steps forward that he's made, really since the year they won the Cup, have been tremendous, especially in the offensive zone, and it came at a good time because he just got that big ticket a couple of years ago, 2 off seasons ago maybe.
Absolutely. We agree on the top 3. Number 4, we might disagree. Number 4, I got Seth Jones.
Nice. All right, I don't. Cool.
All right. Seth Jones, he's not a guy that wows you on the stat sheet, but if you watch Columbus play any game, he is their anchor. He is just good at everything. He's so solid in his own end. And like I said, if you watch a Columbus game, and you go, and somebody says, who's the best player on the ice? You're going to say Seth Jones. No doubt about it. That guy is just, I think he's criminally underrated. I'm happy that people are sort of starting to give him the credit he deserves. But, I mean, my God, he played in that 5 overtime game. He played like an hour and a half.
That was incredible.
It's incredible. The guy's the definition of a horse.
Yep.
And he to me is just, he might be my favorite defenseman. I love Seth Jones. I love to just watch him.
Yeah.
He's just good at everything.
I remember his draft year. He was a potential first overall pick. I think he went third. To Nashville. But let's never forget that Johansson trade.
Oh my God.
You know, he's a good player, but man, this is Seth Jones we're talking about.
That is one of the most blind robberies ever. People talk about the Taylor Hall for Adam Larson deal. They got to start talking about the Seth Jones for a Ryan Johansson deal.
Exactly.
That is way worse.
And look at the trajectory of those two teams since it happened. Nashville almost won the cup, and then they've gone downhill since then. And then Columbus has been on the up and up.
I was just gonna say he wasn't on the cup team, but no, I got you. That pretty much in the years after the immediate seasons, it's just they're just going in completely different directions. And the reason, I won't say the only reason that Torts' culture is working so well in Columbus is because of Seth Jones. But God, I mean, he's the poster child of it.
Yeah.
He is just a friggin' pain in the ass to play against. Any area of the ice.
And it takes a certain type of player to be able to succeed under John Tortorella, and I think Seth Jones fits that mold to a T.
Yeah, that's very accurate. I mean, I don't want to compare him to Belichick and Brady, and I'm not going to. I'm not going to because
breaking news.
Hold on. Here's why. So the reason I think that Belichick was so successful is because he preached a win at all costs, team. And who was the poster child of that? Their best player, Tom Brady. Tortorella teaches hard work, grittiness. Who's their best player? Seth Jones. So they have that in common. No doubt about it. Obviously, Seth Jones is not... I don't think Seth Jones is going to go down as the GOAT, but there's a little bit of similarity there. At least I think so.
Yep. So my number 4, this is the first one that we don't have that match. I have Alex Pietrangelo. I just love what he brings to the table. I'm not sure he's quite as exciting as Seth Jones. He probably has him beat there, but Alex Pietrangelo is just steady Eddie back there. He's someone that can really drive a team, as we saw him do with St. Louis. I put a lot of stock into the way that he helped them with that turnaround as captain. I think that says a lot about him. If your team can make such an obvious, blatant turnaround with you as the captain, clearly, I mean, I can't say clearly because I wasn't in the locker room, but I'd like to think that he was a big part of that culture change,
sure,
especially once they got Craig Berube. And I think Vegas is going to have a great, an 8-year contract? I believe so.
Yeah.
7 years?
Yep.
Yeah, they're going to really love him. And, man, I think Vegas looks great for the future, and largely in part because of this Pietrangelo signing.
Yep. I absolutely agree. I mean, in the near future, for sure, anytime you sign a defenseman that's north of 30 for a long-term deal, it's a little bit of a risk. But in the immediate future, look out. So, number 5, I have Pietrangelo. That was a pretty good description. I don't have a whole lot more to add on to that.
Gotcha.
So who do you got at 5?
My number 5, you'll actually like this one. It's Cale Makar. I know It's a little bit off the grid. I know it's aggressive. I understand it's aggressive, but I don't even know where to start. I really don't. His feet move so fast. It's incredible. I understand a lot of people would see this and say, man, how could you do that? I won't say unproven, but he's only played 1 year. But every time I watch him play, I try to take that approach and say, okay, I'll try to criticize him a little bit here. And his athletic ability, the way his feet move, his skating ability, and the way that he can combine that with the way he sees the ice. I mean, I understand it's probably an aggressive move for me to have him at number 5 now, but this is going to be his league for a while. I really do think that. And I think, just like Vegas, for the next few years, Colorado might be the team to beat.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, Cale, you said it. I think the best part of that guy's game is his feet. He moves differently than everybody else.
Right.
And I mean, it was really obvious when he played in college because he's playing against worse players. But it's just translated to the next level, no problem.
Seamlessly.
No problem. And every single game, it seems like he gets better. And he's going to get more physical. And he's going to become more dominant in the offensive zone, which is horrifying for the rest of the league to think about. So I like the Cale pick at, what was it, number 5?
It was number 5. And I'd like to add one thing. This isn't a direct comparison, but in a way he reminds me of a guy like Jack Eichel because...
Oh yeah. Oh, that's a great comparison. Man. Wow. Seconds,
you watch him for 2 seconds and you realize he skates differently. He skates much more efficiently than the average player. And it's not necessarily the same way. Eichel's is more of his up and down stride. It's so long and efficient. Cale is just he's like a ballerina out there.
Yeah.
His agility is just, I know I've already used this word already, but it's borderline unprecedented.
It's effortless.
The NHL, the skaters in the NHL are better now than they've ever been, and he's up there already at one of the best in today's game.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
I mean, the two best skaters I've ever seen in person up close, Makar and Eichel, and it's not all that close. Those are the only two guys where it doesn't even look like they're trying. It doesn't even look like they're trying. It's just a combination of how smooth they are, how long their strides are. It's did you say breathtaking?
I said borderline unprecedented.
Borderline unprecedented is borderline extremely accurate because that's what it is. So I have Makar at number 7.
Okay.
My number 6, I don't know if you're going to agree with me, but I don't really know if I care. I got Charlie McAvoy.
Oh, okay.
Charlie McAvoy, he is the kind of guy... Here's why I have Charlie McAvoy number 6. In the biggest games, you get the best Charlie McAvoy. And people might say, well, you have to be consistent and do it all the time. And that's true. No doubt about it. That is true. But what is also true is that it's consistent that in the playoffs is when he's going to be at his best. When he's going to be an absolute stud, an absolute lethal number 1 defenseman. You've seen it at every single level. The biggest game gets the best McAvoy. You saw it in the World Juniors in 2017. You saw it at BU, and now you're seeing it for the Bruins in the playoffs. They leaned on this guy this year in the bubble. Granted, they went out in 5 games, but Torrey Krug didn't have a great play-in or great playoffs. Brandon Carlo didn't have a great playoffs, and Zdeno Chara didn't have a great playoffs. The one guy that did was the best player on the team, Charlie McAvoy. And he's an elite defenseman. And the question of all these guys, of any player, is what do you do in the biggest spots? Because that's what matters. The playoffs is what matters. And like I've said, that's when he's at his best.
Right. We're talking about one of the biggest bargain contracts in the NHL, I think, with him. The fact that his deal starts with a 3 is incredible. I remember the day he signed that, and that's awesome. I mean, he kind of betting on himself, but I think it's mainly because he liked what the Bruins were doing, and I think he wanted to be a part of that team. I mean, it's 4.9. I apologize, 4.9. I think that's crazy. I know I said 3 at first, but it is 4.9, and I think that is just that's great for Boston. They got 2 more years of that, and then we'll see what happens. But I think him and Cale and some other guy who is possibly coming up later, Quinn Hughes. I think those 3 guys, maybe Miro Heiskanen. I think the league is going to largely revolve around them for a long time.
Yeah, I agree. Great up and coming talent on the defensive side. I would say if there's one knock against Charlie McAvoy, it's that he doesn't provide consistent offense from the back end. But you want to know when he does provide offense from the back end? In the playoffs. So I got him over Makar, and I've seen both of them play a lot.
I remember I went to a game. He played a little bit at the end of the 2016 season,
or was it 17? But yeah,
you're right. It was 2017. You're right. It was 2016-17, and he played in the 2017 playoffs against Ottawa. And do you remember Erik Karlsson in the handshake line?
I do not. I just remember
they're shaking hands after the game, and Karlsson, he stops the whole line for maybe 30 seconds, and he's just talking. The camera zooms in on him. He's just talking to McAvoy, patting him on the back, shaking his hand. And after the game, McAvoy was very modest about it, but obviously a reporter asked him, and he said, yeah, he was basically telling me that I'm going to be a good player in this league for a long time. And that was Erik Karlsson.
Yep.
And I can't even imagine being fresh out of college and hearing that from someone who's taken a step back, but at the time, Karlsson was the best of the best. And
in that series, Karlsson was was a god.
Didn't he have that nasty saucer pass?
Yeah, that's what I was about to say
Iconic.
earlier. Oh my god, it
Oh
almost hit
my!
the
As
garden
someone who
roof. It almost hit
I
the
have
scoreboard.
obviously a lot of experience in hockey myself. I mean, I'm just a men's league hero now, but saucer passes like that, like in motion, that's incredible skill level. And I mean, we're talking about McAvoy here, but to get that praise from a guy like Erik Karlsson is just incredible. And I remember my first time seeing McAvoy. It might have actually been with you and Sean
Really?
Kay. We were at the Winnipeg game. Do you recall that?
Yeah,
It was one of
yeah.
the
He
shootouts.
scored on his birthday.
Yup, he scored the game winner in the shootout. But it wasn't that stuck out to me. I remember watching him on the power play, and he was working the point, and very much like what I was saying about Cale Makar, his feet are just a motor, and he moves all around that blue line. He'll go from one end of the boards to the other, and it's all just these quick little crossovers, and I think that is just what makes a good defenseman in the year 2020.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's extending Zdeno Chara's career by like 3 or 4 years.
Seriously.
I mean, that's not a knock against Chara, but when you're 43 and
Yeah.
you're 6'9", it's a lot harder to move than when you were 23 or 33. But when you got Charlie McAvoy, you could really be a stationary defenseman, and that's made Chara still very effective in this league.
Maybe that's how they got McAvoy for so cheap, because they're giving him 4.9, but they also have a handshake agreement that Chara gives him half his money.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah.
So you got it 6.
So I have not given my number 6 yet, I believe. That was your 6, right?
Correct.
All right, so here I got Seth Jones. I mean, you said a lot about him. We both went in depth about Seth Jones. No need to really reiterate too much, but yeah, if you're talking about a guy who can just drive the play forward, starting from his own end, steady, calm, composed, Seth Jones is your guy. And like I said, plays very well under the Tortorella system, which not everybody can do. And there are some good players that can't, that we've seen over the years, but that's not an issue for Seth Jones.
Agreed. Well said. So at number 7, I have Cale Makar. The guy's the next Erik Karlsson. He might be better than Erik Karlsson. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, we could go on, but, it would be a little too long. We could go on for hours and hours, because you've had the privilege of seeing him in person. I personally don't think I have. No, I haven't seen him in person, but he's definitely on my bucket list, because those guys with the quick feet, once you see them up close, it's even more incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's effortless, breathtaking, whatever adjective you want to throw in there. Adverb, maybe. Maybe I think breathtaking might be an adverb.
And he's a Western Canadian kid who turned down the WHL to play college hockey, and they usually don't do that, so I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and he committed to UMass, and then there was a coaching change, and he's stuck by it. He's a very honorable guy. That's why I think that he's got all the makings to being a superstar if he's not already.
Is it my turn now for
Yeah,
number...
who
So
got
this
it
is
7?
my number 7?
Yeah.
All right. He's taken a step back, but I still like Brent Burns. He's been a great offensive player his whole career. In fact, he even started out as a forward coming out of, I believe, the OHL. And he only put up 45 points this past year. It was kind of an ugly year for him, but he's also on a struggling San Jose team. The year before, however, we're looking at 83 points. And then the year before that, it was 67, then 76, then 75. So those are his last 4 years, with the exception of last year. So, he's still a great defenseman. I think it's funny how he's on the same team as Erik Karlsson, because I see them in kind of the same light, as in they're probably towards the end of their careers, and I don't know if that was supposed to be the case when they signed Karlsson to that 8-year deal. But I still like Brent Burns. I think he has a lot of potential, and I think he's done a good job of stabilizing a San Jose team that, personally, I don't love their direction, and I think he's done a good job at keeping them afloat.
I don't mean to put you on blast here, but you have Brent Burns over Charlie McAvoy? Brent Burns
I
can't
just saw those
skate.
83 points, and I think that in combination with what he's established as his legacy in the NHL, I think he's just a very established player. Um, yeah,
I
that's
don't
my
know.
number 7. That's why we do these lists. There's always going to be some disagreement.
I don't know. Brent Burns skating and him in his own end. Hold him back. But
Who do
that
you
that
have
is what
for?
you said. That is what
You already gave your number 7,
I
right? So
did.
you got number 8.
Oh, number 8. Yeah. So you might be able to touch on this guy a little bit more than I can. Number 8 I have is Jacob Slavin.
Nice,
I mean, he's just
nice.
no flash. He's not sexy. He's just a solid defenseman. A little bit like Jones, not as offensive, but he's just stout in his own. He's just stout in his own end, and I like how people are starting to give him a little bit more of the praise that he deserves. I mean, I believe he came in 5th in the Norris Trophy voting, and yeah, I think he's gonna be a star. He'll probably be an underappreciated star, but I think he's a star in the league.
Yeah. So the year that I remember very clearly was his season in the year 2016-17. He put up 34 points. I mean, that's not really his game. I don't look too much at his scoring, although he did have a high scoring playoff. But Carolina didn't make the playoffs that year. They actually weren't even that close, and he was a plus 23. He actually was probably only 10, 12, you know, points back, or not points, but the league leader in plus minus is usually around a plus 35, plus 40. And he was on a struggling Carolina team where probably 80% of the roster wasn't even a plus. They were all minuses. And him and Brett Pesce as a pairing dominated the competition. I don't even know if I should use the word dominated, because you mentioned it's he has a subtle game almost. But if we're talking about a guy who is reliable back there and is going to give you hard-working minutes with a very good hockey IQ, Jacob Slavin, he's just that guy that goes under the radar and gets it all done quietly. And finally, he's starting to get his praise. And you tend to see that. It's tough for the casual fan to appreciate the guys who play his kind of a game, because he is not an offensive defenseman. He puts up modest points, but for those guys, sometimes it takes a few years of consistency for fans to start to really notice you. A guy like Devon Taves is starting to fall into that window where he's getting really appreciated. So personally, I always thought Jacob Slavin would get recognized for how good he is, and he's a 4th-round pick. I love that. I love how Carolina was able to get him in the middle rounds out of, I think it was Colorado College. And yeah, he has a brother too, actually, who's drafted, and I'd like to see where he goes. But yeah, that's a great pick with Jacob Slavin, and hint, hint, he'll be coming up later for me.
Well, thank you. Who do you got at number 8?
My number 8, so this is where I have Quinn Hughes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll say the same with him as I did with Makar. I see them as interchangeable. I still see Makar as better. I was pretty set on that for quite a while. I know there was that huge debate last year throughout the course of the season about who was going to win the Calder, because it was obviously going to be one of those two. Like you, I gave the strong edge to Makar, really because of the eye test. If you look at the numbers, they're pretty similar, but something about Makar, he just has that, we talked about it. It's unbelievable the way his feet move, and same with Quinn Hughes. I think, although I don't want to compare him too much to Makar, he's got to get used to it, because that's the guy he's going to be compared to his whole career, and that's not such a bad thing, because that means he's one of the best.
Yeah. Well, Hughes he's just an elite passer. And he's an elite power play quarterback. So Hughes just missed my list.
Okay.
But number 9, I have Miro Heiskanen.
Just missed mine.
A young guy, long, and he's played his best games in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And to me, that's what makes a player elite. Because when the chips are on the table, how do you play? And Heiskanen, did he lead the team in scoring from the back end? I mean, that's...
Did he?
I think so. It was pretty... it's insane. So I expect him to keep getting better. I expect him, Makar, Hughes, McAvoy to be competing for Norris trophies for the next decade plus. And that's very exciting.
Yeah. Like, I mean, these defensemen, man, I don't know if we've ever had a spurt like this where there's just all these young defensemen being pumped out from all these different countries. I remember, I don't know if you've ever seen the YouTube video or anything, but have you ever seen the video of Heiskanen's first NHL shift?
I have not.
Oh my. So they win it's a defensive zone draw. First face-off he's ever been out for. Puck goes right back to him, and he just wheels it up the boards. Beats everybody wide. Everybody. As a defenseman. His first time touching the puck in an NHL game. And then he kind of like loses it for a second, recollects it, and just dances around the whole zone, sets up all these plays. And that's his first 30 seconds of NHL experience. And that's just indicative of how quickly these kids can hop in so seamlessly. And I think that's kind of new. If you look, they even talk about this on Spit and Chicklets sometimes. Back in the day when Whitney and Bissonnette were coming up, it was more like baseball where you had to prove yourself in the minors. And you saw more guys spending time in the AHL, even if they were a top pick. Now, for whatever reason, they're just ready. I don't know if it's the development's improved or the leagues that they play in prior to playing in the NHL are just better. But something's up here. I mean, these defensemen that have been coming out, I mean, we could have made a list of just guys under 20, 25, I should say. I mean, there's a lot out there, and Miro Heiskanen, he's, you said it with that Norris conversation, he's going to be right up there with Makar, Hughes, etc. for a long time.
No doubt about it.
So, that was your number 9,
correct?
So my number 9, Jacob Slavin. I couldn't leave him off this list. I was afraid that it would be unconventional. I was very happy to hear you had him because, like I said, guys like that don't score a ton of goals on defense, it takes fans like a couple years to realize how good they are. And I'm just glad that it's starting to become more well-known throughout the league that he is top tier. In my mind, I think it's absurd that Dougie Hamilton gets as much recognition as he does. I think
Points. It's all about points.
I think Slavin is so far above him, it's not even remotely close, but you're absolutely right. I think people look at points a little bit too much when it comes to defensemen. And you mentioned earlier, very quickly, advanced metrics. Not huge on them, still not 100% sold, but I think they are more telling for defensemen than forwards. And that's just an area where you really start to see Slavin's underlying numbers. They're just off the charts.
Yeah. I agree completely. I mean, that's why he's on my list. But you mentioned advanced metrics. And for my number 10 for me was pretty hard. There were a bunch of different guys. So I really went to the advanced metrics. I went to the nitty-gritty stuff. And at number 10, I went Shea Theodore. And I think Shea Theodore is sort of starting to get a lot of recognition too. 6th in the Norris voting. Every single year he's been increasing his points. And some advanced metrics. He's the NHL leader in expected plus minus. And he leads the NHL in Corsi percentage among D-men. I really like...
Corsi's big.
Yeah. I really like defensemen that are long and can skate. And that's Shea Theodore.
Yeah, he had cancer too. Came back from it.
Well, then he's a fighter too.
Yeah, he's great. I like him a lot, and I actually was very close to putting him on this list. My final slot does go to Miro Heiskanen. We already discussed him in depth, so just to go 1 through 10 here, just to clarify, I got Hedman, Yossi, Carlson, Pietrangelo, Makar, Jones, Burns, Hughes, Slavin, Heiskanen. I do have some honorable mentions as well. I don't know if you added.
I did as well.
All right. What are your honorable mentions?
So my honorable mentions are Morgan Riley, just because Toronto's their defense has been documented as being just porous for the better when they've been good and competing for the playoffs. They're just porous, and Morgan Riley has really been that anchor. And he provides, he's a great power play quarterback. So he's on there. Thomas Chabot, similar. Not similar in that the team competes because Otto's horrible. But I think he's a little bit underrated. And then Colton Parayko, he's a legitimate number 1 defenseman. And I think people are going to realize that now that Petrangelo's not there.
Okay, yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with any of those. I got Mark Giordano. I know he won the Norris Trophy last year. I don't know. I think it was a little bit of a one-off. What do you think about that?
I think he's starting to show his age a little bit.
Right. I mean, that 1 year he had last year when he put up basically a point a game or close to that, that is not indicative of the rest of his career. He's still an incredible defenseman. I don't want to leave his name out. That's why he's in my honorable mentions. But to me, just looking at the guys that we have on our list, he didn't quite crack it. I also have Shea Weber. I mean, you don't hear as much about him as you used to, but he was an elite defenseman for a long time. And he this game is so fast now that once you lose just a single step, things get really, really hard. And I didn't want to leave him off the list, but he's not the player really that he used to be.
I mean, he had a good bubble. He was good. He had a good bubble. He was effective in the bubble.
Actually.
Yeah.
Which is a little surprising because you think the older guys might have an issue coming back, but he's always been someone who takes care of his body. I remember in Nashville, that was when he could have been considered one of the best of the best. I think back in the day, he would have easily cracked my top 5, but him, Erik Karlsson, sometimes once those defensemen lose just one step, the game becomes a lot more challenging.
No doubt about it. No doubt. But I like Weber. He's probably not near mine just because, like you said, he lost a step. But he's still a really good defenseman, no doubt.
Right.
But
I'd also maybe bring up a guy like Zach Werenski.
Yeah.
I think him and Adam Fox have a lot of potential for the future.
Yep.
But, I couldn't put them on quite yet. I got to see a little more.
No. Werenski was close because Werenski had an unbelievable offensive year this year.
Yep.
So, but that's it. That's all we got. Hopefully you enjoyed listening to our conversations about defensemen, professional, and the one in the college ranks. And it might only be college, but hockey's back. So that's awesome. But before we go, you got anything you want to say, Dylan?
Man, I don't even want to get into the whole OHL thing because that will become much more than just a finishing thought. It'll become a whole monologue. But
that's true.
Yeah. Maybe a story for another day. I think we already had topics lined up for this one, but man, I just really hope they figure that out because half those kids are drafted. I'm sorry, you can't play in the NHL a year after you didn't check. That's just not going to work. I'm afraid of really one thing. I don't know if you saw what John Scott was saying about this issue. Did you hear about that?
I saw the tweet. I can't remember what he said.
It's a little scary, I don't completely think it's going to happen, but I do see the possibility. He pointed out what could happen here is if they play this OHL season with no checking, think of all the kind of the softies at the end of the season that are going to point at the numbers and say, look at this. Concussions are down 90%. Broken bones are down 80%. This is awesome. This is what we needed all these years. And who knows, that could be a snowball effect. That could be the beginning of it. And I'd hate the idea of seeing it gradually stripped from hockey, but I'm confident that the hockey community just wouldn't stand for that.
Oh, I agree. I agree with that. No, I sort of see both points. I think that's a little bit sort of fearful in Scott's eyes. I don't think that they're ever going to get rid of checking, but you wouldn't figure they'd ever get rid of it in the OHL either.
Right.
So
if they tried to take this to the next step, the backlash would just be too much. I couldn't imagine this becoming a widespread thing, but I did think it was an interesting point.
Definitely.
Also, I don't know if you saw. So it was the person. Her name's Lisa McLeod. She's the one who came out and said definitively, no checking, no negotiation. You're either not going to check or you're not going to play. End of story. And then 3 days later, the premier of Ontario, who is above her, he comes out, and it's much more optimistic. It wasn't definitive by any means, but he basically said, no, hold up here. We're going to talk about this. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But as of now, the OHL is slated to begin play with no checking, and that just is, man, who would have ever thought?
That's definitely we'll wait and see. No doubt about it, because I think it could go either way. But we didn't want to add another hour to the show, so that's it for the OHL checking.
Stop me.
Yeah, no doubt about it. But if you made it to this point in the episode, thanks for listening. Trivia coming up soon. I'm excited for it. Excited for college hockey, but thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.